Hi everybody, Stuart Armstrong here from the Talent Equation. Hope you're doing well. Hope your weekends went well and all the coaching that you were doing was working brilliantly, and you had some really good results, or you at least had some very good processes, even if the results didn't particularly go that well, and you had some good performance markers. This weekend, no coaching for me because I was heavily involved in the running of the Future Player Conference for the day job with the RFU. Really fascinating few days, and just wanted to quickly share with you a few sort of thoughts and insights from that particular session, because I'm having a hard time writing this stuff down at the moment, so I'm going to go down the video route and share with you some of the thoughts and ideas. I think I'm going to zero in on a couple of things really that I took away. One was we had a fantastic keynote from a good friend of mine, Professor Ross Tucker, who shared with us some really interesting thoughts. He kind of looked into the kind of economics of talent development really, and he was playing kind of the balancing act that sort of people involved in the development of talent have to play, which is around the idea of do you want your system to be efficient, or do you want your system to be effective? Now, if you want your system to be efficient, then in actual fact you probably don't want it to be too smooth. I think a lot of people working in talent development want the pathway to be kind of almost like frictionless, and they want to work it so that the player can move through it with maximum levels of efficiency. But there is some significant evidence to suggest that actually, because we have this concept of talent needs trauma, probably going a bit too far there, but the idea of a non-linear pathway and actually having sort of speed bumps makes quite a difference and actually helps the player develop even better moving further forward. So the idea of an efficient pathway may not be that good, because if it's too smooth, you probably don't produce as good a performer. The question that Ross posed was, do you want to produce lots and lots of good players versus a few absolute world best? And his suggestion was that if you move away from an efficiency model towards an effectiveness model, what you might decide to do is to allow the system itself to actually be quite full of friction. So actually you have to get used to high levels of attrition, dropout, people leaving the game, on the basis that will also sort of produce, kind of counterintuitively, a better player further up the track. So his contention is that if you're going to make economic decisions about your talent pathway, you probably need to look at where you're going to place your investment, or where you're going to place your emphasis, or where you're going to place your time and your importance. And his view is that if you've got to go one or the other, because in the real world there's little resource here. We're not fully resourced in any of these scenarios. Then you're probably better off allowing the system to do what it does with its levels of friction or whatever, and then just arrive at a final point that then produces you this kind of great player, kind of almost like leave it to its own devices to a certain extent. I think that the challenge with something like that, and what I've been thinking about, is are there ways in which, given some of our advances in technology, and also given the fact that we may have limited resources, but if we're less resourced, can we be more resourceful? And are there ways in which that we can leverage these issues and challenges to actually give us almost like the best of both worlds? Does it have to be a zero sum where an efficient pathway therefore is less effective? Can you have a more efficient pathway and a more effective pathway by actually just being more skillful with the way that you make your pathway? It's this kind of constant challenge, isn't it, between participation and development and the need to retain players versus the need to develop players. Do they have to work against each other, or can you find a way of actually doing both? Is that the real world? And my view on this is that I think we can. I just think we need to really think. We need to be very clever about how we do this, and that's actually where I think the kind of sports science and the coaching science and the sort of talent development science, if you like, community comes in. Another very interesting presentation that I spent some time with was listening to Dr. Sean Cumming from Bath University and James Bunce, who's the sort of lead sports scientist with the Premier League, Football Premier League, and they shared some really interesting research that they've done looking into maturation in players. They looked at some concept called biobanding, where we're looking at the biological age of players and how you might use that in a number of different ways to kind of as an additional tool almost to help you either identify or make decisions about which players should be retained in your system, as well as also kind of develop them in different ways. And there's some interesting research. The one thing that I thought was really interesting, and I've been really reflecting on this quite hard, is that they shared some really interesting data, whereby if you have a group of players and they're in an age band, and classically you'll have the kind of Q1 player, the Q2 players, Q3 players, Q4 players, born in the quarters of the year, and the classic sort of relative age discussion goes around and talks about this idea of that usually in your talent system you're overrepresented by players who are born earlier in the year, because they are essentially a year further developed than players born later in the year, who are essentially only a couple of months into that year. And that generally speaking happens, and Neil McCarthy from the Gloucester Academy shared some of the research he's done with Dave Collins up at University of Central Lancashire, looking into relative age effect as well. And his argument is actually that relative age effect actually might be one of the frictions, might be one of the deliberate frictions, on the basis that what we actually see in most sports systems is that although it starts out where you've got mostly kids born in the first half of the year in the early parts of your talent system, by the time you come to the international levels, what you end up seeing is it actually reverses, and you actually see more people from the kind of second half of the year actually representing at international level. And the suggestion here is that those players, they kind of develop some qualities, and he refers to Anya McNamara's work around psychological characteristics of developing excellence. And you can point to other researchers who've done similar work, where they essentially, those players, because they have to adapt, because they have to find ways to achieve, because of their relative disadvantage, they actually come through to the top in the end. So that's the kind of suggestion that that's made by Neil's work, and that sort of complements really nicely with the stuff that Sean and James presented, because what they're saying is actually if we can look into this in more detail and actually find out more about growth and maturation about the individuals, then actually maybe we can start to make some different comparisons, because you can actually have quite a lot of kids who, for example, are a Q4 birthday, so relatively young chronologically, but biologically are maybe a year and a half older than somebody who is actually chronologically 8 or 9 months older. And how do you balance all those things up? So what we're saying is that we can look into this now, and we can look at the biological side, we can look at the we can look at their age, we can look at their training age, we can look at a variety of factors, and using those we create a different picture of the athlete, and then that can help us make some interesting decisions. The other aspect that really resonated me with some data that Sean shared, which I'll try and post on the blog if I can find it at some stage, which has come out from the German FA, where what they've looked at is they've looked at the relative abilities of players in different quartiles. And what they discovered was that as a general rule, if you compare a, say, Q1 player versus a Q4 player, what you'll see is that they actually develop, they look very similar. They look very similar. The Q1s are better. The Q1s are they look better than the Q2s, so Q4s do. But what you find then is if you actually to draw a line that talks about the average ability of the players, right, as they go through this kind of trajectory towards performance, what you find is although the Q1s are better than the Q4s relatively to their age, they're actually below the line according to where they should be, whereas the Q1s are actually above the line whereas they should be in terms of their kind of biological age, if you like. And that's really interesting, because what you're actually saying is these kids are the ones that get picked because they look better than these. But actually, if you looked at a line that says, where are you relative to your ability level according to here, you actually wouldn't necessarily keep these in. And that might be one of the reasons why you see more quarter fours coming through longer term. So anyway, rambling conversations, lots of different interesting ideas and thoughts, but I just wanted to share some of those with you because they're just sort of rattling around in my head at the moment. And I think it's an area where if we can use these kinds of sort of analytical data, then it helps us to make some better decisions. So what we can then do is make our system more effective and more efficient. So I'm thinking that we might be onto something as far as this is concerned. Anyway, more to come. I'm sure I've got some more ideas and thoughts to share with you, but this was just a start point, and I'll give you another episode in a couple of weeks' time. If you want any more information about this, head over to www.thetalentequation.co.uk. You can find me on there, or head over to my Twitter channel, which is @Stu_arm, where you'll see me arguing with people generally most days around various different aspects of talent development and coaching. Okay, so bye for now.